Thank you for your time this evening, sir. Just to maybe expand more on how this data was collected and its findings.
So basically what we did as a group was look at data from the countries where we could get the best data, so 21 countries, to look at the levels of mortality from COVID, but also to understand the excess mortality, and then link that with fertility patterns in those countries so that we could get an estimate of who among those who've sadly died from COVID were parents and also grandparents involved in the daily care of their children, and so that we could get a full picture of the loss of caregivers from this pandemic.
What age group is most affected by this data research? Are we looking at more boys, more girls, and that particular age group? What are the reasons why we're finding that they're being orphaned more by this pandemic?
So children of all ages are affected. So we have, all the way from relatively newborn children through to adolescents. But the largest group is definitely adolescents. So as we know, COVID has a tendency to have higher mortality rates the older you are. And that means that on average, the parents who have died are older and therefore their children are older. So a large proportion of these children are adolescents. And then we have to deal with those particular needs of that group, because there can be a lot of risks associated with losing a caregiver during adolescence. It's a very sensitive period of development, and children need a lot of support at that time. So it's something that we're very concerned about, that this large proportion of children who've lost a caregiver and a parent are adolescents.
Does the research go into what happens to these children after they're orphaned?
No, that's really what we're calling people to look at. So what we've done with this research is flag an issue, which we said that more people didn't think about to start with. I mean, I think we were really focused on the illness and the death from the pandemic, and we were already focused on the lockdown measures and everything that was happening. But, COVID was always presented as this illness that affects older people, and it just led us to not necessarily think about children. And so what we've been trying to do with this research is really flagging that children are really seriously affected. When parents are ill, when parents die, then children are affected, and we need to step in and do something about that. But what we know from past experience, we've seen pandemics before that have led to parental loss. So during HIV and AIDS, large numbers of parents died. And we got a very clear understanding of what could happen to children. And what's clear is that the death itself, while sad and distressing for a child, does not determine the long-term consequences. What determines the long-term consequences is what happens next. If we stand back and allow children to experience hurtful or neglectful circumstances, if we don't resource families who are willing to provide care, then children suffer in an environment which can cause long-term consequences, long-term harm for them. But if we act quickly, while they might be sad and bereaved, we'll be able to prevent the long-term harm that comes from neglect.
My next question would be around this rate of children being orphaned. Does it border on a crisis?
It's a very rapid rate. So the numbers we're talking about are large. I mean, so if we're thinking about in South Africa alone, we're talking now, we continually update the estimate. So the current estimate for South Africa is around 150,000 children who've lost a parent. And then if you look a little bit wider, you can say there's about 170,000 who've lost a primary caregiver, because it's not always parents who are taking care of children. And then if you combine those two, if you say who has lost a primary and secondary caregiver, you're looking at over 200,000 children. This is a large number of children in a single country, and it's happened very quickly. So while in the past we've experienced far higher rates of parental loss due to HIV and AIDS, it did play out more slowly. COVID leads to quite quick deaths and quite unexpected deaths often. And so the chance to plan and prepare is very limited. So we are certainly looking at a very serious situation for a very large number of children.
Do we know what behavior these children are displaying? I mean, losing a parent is obviously very traumatic.
Well, as I was saying, so the loss itself leads to, bereavement and sadness and often some sort of withdrawal and pullback. The negative consequences people often associate with these types of things. So when we saw it with HIV/AIDS, saying children will engage in higher risk behaviors with, perhaps risky sexual behaviors or substance use or dropping out of school. As I was saying, that doesn't come from the death itself. That comes from what we do next. If we stand back and say, oh, we don't have the resources to support those people who are willing to care for these children, we don't have the means to make sure those children are placed in a supportive family environment, then these negative behaviors can come out, and they can be quite serious. But we should be very clear that they will not be as a result of the COVID pandemic. They will be a result of our inaction in responding to it.
And what is the data saying around which parent is dying? Are we seeing more mothers or fathers?
So globally, we're seeing more fathers. So again, fathers tend to be older when they have children, and as COVID affects the mortality is more serious the older you are, we are seeing a loss of more fathers. And so a lot of the concerns are then related to the types of support that fathers play. And, you know, that's the role in the children's life themselves, but often also a financial role, supporting the household and so forth. And one thing we should be clear when we're thinking about South Africa is that often people then respond with a lot of fathers are absent and then maybe not involved in the child's life themselves. And that's true for some people. But a lot of men play fathering roles to children that are not their own. So whether they are an uncle or another male member of the household, and provide support within that household. And we're not actually capturing those. So we're actually going to see another level of loss that we're not measuring of these men who are playing this supportive role in the family, and that we're missing by counting only sort of biological fathers, not what has sometimes been referred to as social fathers, men who've taken on a role of father when the biological father is not there.
So moving forward, Mr. Desmond, how do we then decrease this rate? So, I mean, we have to really come at it from all sides. So just with the epidemic as a whole, you know, we have to increase vaccination rates, we have to improve access to treatment, and we have to stop the mortality in order to decrease the rate at which the number of parents are dying, for the sake of the parent and for the sake of the child. But we also need to think about what is going to happen with these children who've already lost a parent. There's nothing we can do. We can't go back. The 150,000 children now who've lost a parent, or the 200,000 who've lost a primary or secondary caregiver, there's no going back on that. So really what we have to do now is strengthen the systems that we have to support those children. And now we're not short in South Africa of people who are willing to take care of children. That is, even through the height of the HIV epidemic, we've never been short of people who are willing to stand up and take on a responsibility. Typically what we're lacking is the resources to do that. People are struggling financially, and to take on an additional child or support a family who's just lost a caregiver is difficult. So we need to make sure we have the systems to get the support to the families. We have willing people. We just need to get the systems strengthened so that we provide the appropriate financial and material support to allow those people to really stand and up and take care of children that they've expressed often a willingness to do, but don't have the resources to do that. Thank you so much for your time this evening. That was very insightful. That was researcher Mr. Chris Desmond speaking about the rate of children being orphaned as a result of the pandemic.